currencies, a lot about Russia and cryptocurrency. And we'll talk about all of this in roughly this order. So today, also, it's worth noting that today is the expiration for that coupon code, The Comeback, on the amazing programs on Building Your Wealth link down below. Those private live streams every morning the market opens for the opening bell. Okay, let's first start with supply chains. So a supply chain consultancy group in Chicago was interviewed by the New York Times and had the following to say. They expect that already bad supply chains are likely going to get substantially worse. Then, unfortunately, rates for ocean and air freight are expected to, well, in their words, quote, skyrocket. They warned, and sometimes I take this with a little bit of grain of salt because it's like, well, they're a consultancy group on supply chains. So is this kind of like, I don't know, maybe I'm too jaded, but sometimes I look at it and I'm like, are you just trying to get more clients to, get, consulting clients to try to figure out how to navigate around this? No pun intended on navigate. But anyway, this person warns that ocean shipping rates might basically 3x from about $10,000 per container now to around $30,000 per container, and that we might see even higher air freight costs. Now, clearly, that would set up for more of a disaster and more complaining from the companies that have been reporting here in the United States regarding the expensive costs of logistics right now. But to some degree, even though I might be a little jaded hearing this, listen to some of the counter sanctions coming from Russia. Russia is now lashing out, and they've closed their airspace, just for an example with air freight, to 36 different countries, including Europe and much of Canada. And the issue with that is a lot of airplanes essentially fly over Russia to get to China from Europe. So that trade between Europe and China and from China to Europe is now getting more expensive. Now, fortunately, the US is on the other side, so potentially a little bit more insulated here. But look, we have a global economy. We can't pretend that we're isolated and that this issue isn't going to affect us. The prices of air freight go up in Europe. Guess what happens? Logistics companies move more of their airships over there. Planes, in other words. Prices of shipping go up for container ships between China and Europe. Guess what? More ships get diverted over there. It's the same thing that happened with liquid natural gas, where essentially at some point just a few months ago there were so many liquid natural gas ships, and we didn't really have a demand for all those ships. That in some cases the rates for carrying liquid natural gas were actually negative. In other words, people were like paying, the ships that would carry liquid natural gas were paying people to put liquid natural gas on their ships. That was a very brief and odd moment, but that kind of stuff can happen as you shuffle around where these ships are. So those sorts of things and that kind of reshuffling, which makes sense from a business point of view, can hurt us over here. I mean, think about it. If you're operating freight ships in America, why not just divert them to between China and Europe and make 3 times the money? Anyway, we'll see what happens. But obviously, this is going to be a big subject of concern for the Federal Reserve. And the next 2 weeks are going to be critical to see what's on the Federal Reserve's mind. We have not heard from Jay Powell yet, but I'm actually about to tell you about some dates today, or actually this week, I should say, where we're next going to hear from Jay Powell. And no, it's not that FOMC meeting on the 15th or 16th. Stay tuned. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I do want to quickly mention that Federal Reserve President Bostic has reiterated that, look, he's in favor now of a 25 basis point hike for interest rates in March, but he says that he would consider a half-point hike, quote, if inflation fails to decline. Right now, the market's only pricing in about a 10.4% chance that we'll get a 50 basis point hike in 2 weeks, but we've got a lot of reports coming up that could easily flip this on its head. And I'll tell you, if we get some bad news from these reports over the next 2 weeks, and we see those odds of a 50 basis point jump, we're going to see a downward move in markets. So just be prepared, limit your margin, be prepared for some volatility here, which might end up being buying opportunities. We'll talk more about that. Big fears that we're going to be looking for here are going to be stagflationary fears. We've had some great retail sales numbers from December and January, but there are concerns that that's going to start tapering, especially with the fear of war, potentially leading folks to want to save more, especially since they believe that energy prices could just continue to go higher. Brent crude right now at 101 a barrel, WTI crude, that's the Western crude, sitting at about 96. And the 10-year safe haven asset, the 10-year treasury bond, down to about 1.86 on the yield, which is down below that 2% basis again. And of course, we know we have inflation sitting at around 7.5%, but we get a CPI report coming up. So here's some dates. And what I would do is I would write these down. So if you don't have these written down, what I'd really recommend you do is take a post-it note of some sort and write these down, stick them on your wall or your computer or whatever. You should know these dates. They're really important. Just like, the fact that I spent the last 3 months talking about how Lucid was going to miss on deliveries and miss on earnings, and then they did, and now they fell 14%. You got to write the date of the earnings down to be able to play these sorts of things. Anyway. So first date that we have is tomorrow. We have a State of the Union address. This is Joe Biden's first State of the Union address. I would expect that Joe Biden is going to talk pretty aggressively about fighting inflation, which could potentially be signals for a more hawkish Federal Reserve, fighting Putin, fighting high gas prices at home, and fighting climate change, which maybe we will see a little bit of a boost in EV stocks or energy-related stocks. We'll see, especially green energy afterwards. Who knows, though? Sometimes when Biden talks, nothing ends up happening. Anyway, then on Wednesday and Thursday, and this is probably big, we're probably going to have to watch some of these live, okay? Usually we're just doing the Market Open live streams now with course members in the morning, which is kind of nice because we get the day set up nicely. Remember, you get lifetime access to those courses linked down below, and there's a coupon code expiring tonight. The price goes up every time a coupon expires. So yeah, there's often a coupon, but the price does go up over time. So you just get the best deal the earlier you're in. But anyway, so this Wednesday and Thursday, Fed Chair Jerome Powell will actually be testifying before Congress. And I hate to say it, but this is going to be our first time hearing from Jay Powell since really the minutes of the January meeting, which were a big nothing burger about a week and a half ago. The last time we actually heard personally from Jay Powell giving us the latest info was on January 26th. And the market in certainly technology stocks has only come down since January 26th. Now, a lot of folks like to say, oh, the bottom's way over. Things are way higher now than where they were. Not really. Like if we hop on over and just look at the QQQ, we'll go ahead and get rid of some lines here. We can see the trend that we're on. It's not great. And unfortunately, we literally just hit all-time lows like 2 days ago. We're not out of the woods just yet. So we've got to be a little careful here. And we're going to hit Russia in just a moment. But first, write this down, okay? Wednesday and Thursday, Jay Powell testifies before Congress. My expectation is, since he goes to the different chambers on the different days, that the more important date here is actually going to be Wednesday, because that's when his information is going to be fresh and new. I would kind of so I put a circle around Wednesday, and I kind of think that Thursday is going to be a little bit more, okay, whatever, right? Okay. Wednesday morning, we also get the ADP employment report. Yeah, this one usually has failed. Like this one has been so wrong lately. I don't hang my hat on this one a lot. I care about the employment report that comes out on Friday. But sticking to Wednesday for a moment, Wednesday, so we got the Jay Powell testimony, ADP employment. We also have CPI coming out for the Eurozone. That's going to be an important metric, is to see European inflation, which is usually way lower than ours in the United States. So we'll see what's going on in Europe. On Friday, we get unemployment figures, or employment figures, I should say. We get our new employment report that'll show us what the unemployment rate is. But what you want to write down for this one is you want to pay attention to the month-over-month expectations for wage increases. Now, remember this, the last time we got this report was at the beginning of February, the first Friday in February, so roughly about a month ago. And in that report, we learned that wages were actually going up at an annualized rate of about 8.8%. At the same time, inflation's at about 7.5%. So that means when wages are growing more than inflation is, it's a big warning sign for the wage price spiral. So really what you want is you want to see that month over month number, when you multiply it by 12, come in less than what inflation is. So that way, if consumers are losing purchasing power, which would be the case if the numbers came in like that, then potentially you don't have to worry so much about that wage price spiral. So again, that comes out on Friday. That's the employment report. What I can also do is I can just quickly pull up and see what the current forecast is for the employment report. Now, this can usually change the closer we are to the date, the more accurate it tends to be. But we have, let's see, so this should be the first, second, third, fourth, the morning of the 4th. We're expecting, here we go, we are expecting change in payroll. I want to just look at the month over month. Okay, the survey is actually optimistic. So the survey right now, according to 59 economists, they believe that the average hourly earnings on a month-to-month basis are going to increase about 0.5% on a monthly basis, which works out to about 6% annually. That is less than that 8.8% we got last time, which was just a complete disaster. Now, some other things to know. We've got Joe Manchin complaining that Joe Biden really needs to do something to open up the fact that we can have cleaner oil here in America rather than relying on the 650,000 barrels a day that we do from Russia right now. He calls that, quote, totally ridiculous. Lindsey Graham is calling for sanctioning Russian oil, and this is now the part where we should actually start talking about Russia. We're also going to be talking about crypto a little bit, which if you have not yet been tracking crypto prices, make sure to check out FTX in the link down below, because crypto had an explosion today. We'll talk about why in this video, but I mean, look at this skyrocket here. If we just pull back on the 5-minute chart here, we go all the way back to the 23rd, where we were trading somewhere around 34,000. And so we sat around 40 here. We got rejected multiple times at 40. But I mean, just today, we not only shot up towards 40, but we also broke all the way up to about 44K until getting rejected at about 44K. So pretty wild swings. Do check out FTX in the link in the description down below. Get yourself $10 at free crypto. Okay, so let's talk about Russia. So far, a lot of the sort of nuclear talk, fortunately, has chilled down a little bit. I think this is because Putin is just sort of like, I mean, I don't know. Everybody says he's lost his marbles, maybe, but he hasn't really used much of those sorts of threats today. So maybe he's taking heed to just chill the F out a little bit. I do want to just mention, because there are some people saying, oh, Russia's almost out of troops. Russia's not almost out of troops. Okay, there's a big problem here. See, Russia has 900,000 active troops. Yeah, there are only about 200,000 deployed around Ukraine, but they have 900,000. So they've deployed about 200K. They've got 900,000. And then they have another 2 million troops in reserves. They've got a lot of bodies to throw at this, which sounds very terrible and insensitive. I shouldn't say that. They've got a lot of people's lives to screw up here, okay? It's terrible. Ukraine, in contrast, has 196,000 troops active, and that is, again, relative to the 900,000 troops active in Russia and 900,000 in reserve. Now, well, depending how many of those have actually fled. Now, Ukraine spends about $4.7 billion a year on its military. Russia spends about $45 billion. So Russia spends about 10 times as much money as Ukraine. And for comparison, we spend about 20 times as much as Russia. So 10x Ukraine, you get Russia's military spending. 20x Russia's military spending, you get the United States. We spend almost $1 trillion a year on our military. It is insane. And Russia says they're going to nuke us. It's not talking about it. I think it's baloney. Okay, just between you and me, nobody's launching any nukes. I will bet everything on that. Okay, so spending differences. Okay, so we talked about spending differences. Now, the big real difference here, like practical difference here, is the willpower of Ukrainians. And I really believe their willpower is so freaking strong because of Zelensky. This guy is the face of heroism. And whether or not he is a real badass on the field or not doesn't even matter. It's the impression that matters right now. And in my opinion, I've said this before, the most important thing in this war is that Zelensky stays safe. Like, hey, do what you need to do to motivate, but stay safe. Because you get captured or you get nicked, a lot of motivation is going to go away. Now, it's worth noting, though, that Russia's kind of outgunned with the soldiers that they have deployed. They've deployed about 75% of the troops that they have around Ukraine into Ukraine right now, which is a lot. It's about 150,000 soldiers. But there's this interesting thing that this person, Seth Jones, the VP at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, says about deploying troops and trying to sort of occupy an area. He says that when Germany, and this was an insane number, when Germany invaded and occupied, let's say, Poland, they had 89 troops per 10,000, I'm sorry, per 1,000 people. So that's almost 1 in 10. So almost for every 10 individuals, they almost had 1 troop, which is crazy, or 1 soldier. Usually you get something that's more like 20 troops per 1,000. Like when NATO was in Bosnia, they had 17.5 per 1,000. NATO in Kosovo, they had 19.3 per 1,000. So that would be somewhere around 1 troop for every 50 individuals, right? 1 soldier. And the same was true when we had Operation Iraqi Freedom. There were an estimate of about 20 troops per 1,000 individuals. Well, Russia, for Ukraine, only has 3.4 soldiers per 1,000 people. That's like 1/6 of what was used during Iraqi Freedom, what NATO usually deploys. I mean, I think they really think that the folks in Ukraine are just gonna like roll over. It's kind of a pretty lame deployment. Now, I think because of this, you're starting to see a little bit of siege mentality and lashing out, which is bad. Like, for example, today in Kharkiv, we had a bombardment of a residential area, including the use of cluster munitions. Now, keep in mind, Russia and the United States both do use cluster munitions, but a lot of countries have actually banned the use of these because they're so indiscriminate. Siege mentality, I always like to think of just the reference of like having a catapult with a bunch of rocks on fire, and you're just like, YOLO! Yeah, it's bad. It's just big mess. Unfortunately, these killed 9 civilians, potentially more. This was according to the mayor of Kharkiv. This puts the Ukrainian death toll for individuals in Ukraine somewhere around 406 per the United Nations as well, if not already over. Still at a count of about 14 children, potentially higher at this point. Hopefully not. It's terrible. But anyway, this is really starting to look like a strategic failure by the Russian military. It's I mean, good. Like I hope they don't succeed. Just get out. Anyway, there were talks today. Russia and Ukraine basically summed up the talks by saying, hey, we talked, we had some ideas. Now we're going to go back to our offices and think about how we're going to implement those ideas, and then we'll talk more in a few days. The goal, obviously, of negotiating is a ceasefire and essentially developing some form of rules system for a ceasefire. Who knows if this will include giving Russia control over, let's say, the Donbas in eastern Ukraine or whatever. Who knows? But those talks were conducted today, despite all these shellings that we've heard of. Some other things to know is that there are roughly a count now of 520,000 refugees that have fled Ukraine. Ironically, 129,000 of them, roughly, have gone to Russia. Only like 500 people have gone to Belarus. People are like, yeah, no thanks, not going to Belarus, apparently. 281,000 have gone to Poland, 30K roughly to Slovakia, 84K to Hungary, 36K to Moldova, 32K to Romania, and 34K to other European countries. Now, something that was also interesting is one of the leaders in Bulgaria called these refugees, quote, intelligent and educated refugees. This suggested somewhat of a contrast to migrants who come from, like, the northern tip of Africa or the Middle East, which often these migrants have been met with hostility in Europe. And so I think this is why you're seeing this sort of contrast being drawn by some, because it's kind of like, hey, maybe the thesis is take these folks in, we don't be hostile to these like you are to others. I don't know how I feel about that, but that's what's happening. So I'm just going to not comment on that and report on that. But it is important for you to know that if you don't know European dynamics, a lot of people in Europe are pissed about so many refugees coming to Europe all the freaking time. All right. Now, some other things: Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, they're all limiting access through Europe and distribution to things like Russia Today, Sputnik News. These are Russian news websites. Netflix is limiting Russian channels and distribution of content in Russia. Disney says they're going to see a hit in their revenue because they're pulling like their Encanto soundtrack. They're also going to pause Hollywood releases and Warner Brother movies, including Batman and Turning Red. These will not be available in Russia. National Hockey League ended business relations with Russia, and TikTok is also banning some Russian news outlets. Now, Britain, yesterday, folks in Britain, leaders in Britain were saying, hey, if you want to go fight in Ukraine, more power to you. We stand behind you. They're kind of U-turning on that today and saying, maybe you shouldn't go fight. Yesterday, when I talked about Elon Musk agreeing to provide internet, Starlink internet, to areas that have lost internet in Ukraine, somebody in the comment section said, but how is that possible? They don't have the receivers. And my response was, come on, man, during wartime shipments move fast. And guess what arrived today, folks? A whole semi-truck military vehicle full of Starlink satellite receivers. They have arrived. Russia thanked Elon Musk. Elon Musk replied on Twitter. You can see pictures of those probably if you just look at Elon Musk's replies. I probably liked it as well. Remember, you can just throughout the day, if you want, you can always just check my like history at Real Meat Kevin. As I go through the day, I do sort of just like either videos or things that I don't always play here, as this is, I think, a little bit more information dense. Anyway, the United Nations kicked out 12 diplomats, Russian diplomats, from the United Nations Council, which was quite unprecedented. Jen Psaki said they were spies anyway, so good riddance. The international, she's our White House spokesperson, remember that. International Criminal Court, the ICC, is potentially probing war crimes suits against Russia and crimes against humanity. Jamie Dimon says Russia has ways around the SWIFT banking system since Russia got kicked out of that. Obviously, the Russian ruble plummeted today. It's now up to, I think, just over 107 ruble per dollar. This is also leading to a little bit of a surge in crypto, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Just two things about ports, and then we'll talk about crypto. Turkey has officially decided to restrict Russian warships from bypassing at least Istanbul for now. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just pull up maps on this one. It makes it a little easier to see because some folks are wondering, like, well, what does Istanbul have anything to do with Ukraine? Well, it has to do with the fact that there are Russian warships on the other side or who are trying to come around. So take a look here. If you have Russian warships in the Mediterranean or even out up here, and you want to send your Russian warships around, which might take a couple weeks, right? You send your Russian warships around here. If, let's say, you don't have them all here, then you might deploy them from the north, try to bring them through the Mediterranean. The only way you could really get into the Black Sea right here is going through Istanbul, right here. And Turkey is now saying, yeah, no thanks. Russian warships are not allowed through this strait, which is pretty powerful. I mean, that's now blocking Russian warships here. That is creating some concerns, though, that potentially there could be some hostilities here. I would expect that if Turkey is going to block Russian warships here, they're not going to block them here. They're going to block them here. At least that's what I would do. You don't want artillery going off near downtown Istanbul. Anyway, the United Kingdom is also blocking ships from receiving port access in the United Kingdom for any ship that is operated by Russian citizens or flying a Russian flag, which I understand why they said both, because if they just said Russian flag, then it's like, okay, take the flag down, but also Russian citizens, because every time you port, you have to give your manifest and where you're coming from and who you are and passports and stuff. And they're U-turning any of these ships. So you're seeing these things go pretty broad here. These sanctions are really starting to crush the Russian economy. I mean, I think they are going to. Yeah, what was I going to say? I don't know what I was going to say anymore. I started reading somebody's comment here about Constantinople. Yeah, no, it ain't called that anymore. Anywho, okay, so let's talk about crypto. So, crypto, there was an at least 10% surge in crypto prices today, and partially this is being sourced back to a sudden surge of demand. Oh, that's right. I was going to say I think the Russian economy is going to go into a depression. Their currency's collapsing, their stock market got shut down because it was just collapsing. And so you're seeing now a surge of Russian and Ukrainian money go into things like Bitcoin, not necessarily all cryptos, but definitely Bitcoin, as a way to kind of become a store of wealth. Now, what's interesting is we actually had a little bit of a flippening between the two currencies. The value of Bitcoin had a market cap today of 780 billion after the move, and the ruble moved down, and they kind of passed each other to a market value of 629 million. So if you look at how quickly the ruble has moved, like 50% in the last 4 months, Bitcoin can move just as quickly when you have these sorts of larger inflows, and that's what we're seeing right now, where these larger inflows from Ukraine and Russia, and then you probably add to that FOMO. Like when people see the sticks go up, they FOMO into this stuff all day long, right? There's still plenty of uncertainty, so I don't know that you necessarily have to go nuts over. Chasing cryptos up. Personally, I invested in Cardano last week. I'm happy about that because I bought it at like 80 cents. I don't know. It's up like 20% right now. I'll take it. And Cardano's, I think personally, got a little bit more of a potential upside. So that's one of the reasons I bought that. Of course, right now, one of the things that I do every time I do purchase crypto is I do send an alert as well, purchase or sell, whatever, in the Stocks and Psychology of Money group as well. And that's linked down below with that coupon code expiring today. Remember that coupon does expire today and the price goes up over time. So we did see this. Now, we also saw inflows into BITO, which is the Bitcoin futures ETF, well, one of them. Inflows here of an increase of about 3.7%. And we're seeing a little bit of a break in the correlation between Bitcoin and the S&P 500. Bitcoin was becoming more correlated to the S&P 500. We had a beta of about 0.7 in January, and we've now devolved back down to a beta of about 0.5, which means basically if the S&P goes up 1%, Bitcoin might only go up 0.5%. So you've got that differing correlation. You could say the same thing about Bitcoin potentially going up 2% and the S&P maybe moving 1%. So you're seeing that wedge, that separation happen a little bit more. Russian parliament. What's actually really interesting here is the parliament's always kind of been deemed to be like a rubber stamp parliament in Russia. And 3 individuals from the Russian parliament have actually spoken out against the war today, which is really impressive. And honestly, I have to say quite ballsy, because people like that just end up getting gunned down by Uzis on bridges by 2 motorcyclists in totally apparently random, certainly not targeted spy activities at all in Russia when they do sorts of things like this. So yeah, I'd say that's quite brave. Usually you don't say no to Putin. Anyway, at least not in Russia. Military-wise, Russia has still not received air superiority. There were some questions about fighter jets being delivered to Ukraine, and some folks I saw were leaving comments online saying things like, "Hey, well, how are the Ukrainians going to fly modern planes if they don't have training in them?" And the EU is actually purposefully providing the certain types of jets and MiGs or whatever that can take off in or on Ukrainian airfields that are still up and running and can be flown by Ukrainian pilots. So these things are being considered. Imagine that, considering what kind of plane the Ukrainian military could use before delivering hundreds of millions of dollars worth of weapons. Anyway, fortunately, and I don't want to minimize anyone's job by any means, but fortunately, a lot of the modern tech has gotten a lot easier to use. I'm not saying that so much in terms of like the jets, but like the Javelins and the Stinger missiles and stuff. They're making them easier, which is great for helping like arm the resistance in Ukraine, right? I mean, there are TikToks and Instagrams and videos of people in Ukraine learning how to use weapons for the first time. So I guess there are a lot of very, very brave men and women in Ukraine fighting this. The Pentagon is going as far as calling the resistance, quote, creative and effective, which I really like the second part of that, effective. To me, this kind of reminds me a lot of the movie The Patriot, where you basically have what's his name, Mel Gibson fighting the red coats, walking down the swamp with their trumpets and all this stupid crap. And Mel Gibson and his sons start firing on them from within the trees and the swamps, and they're like, "Oh no, what's happening? The rules of war being broken." Obviously times have changed, but I mean, this is good for Ukrainians. So they are definitely slowing the Russian advance to Kyiv. The Pentagon has, however, said that there is, and we've seen satellite images plastered all over the news all day today, about a 40-mile long convoy heading to Kyiv. I'll pull up a picture here. It's quite wild. This convoy is twice as long as what it was before. It's moving quite slowly, though. Here's what it looks like. So it's about 15 miles away from Kyiv right now. It is 40 miles longer, or 40 miles long, which is twice as long as we believed yesterday. And today, the entire convoy only moved 3 miles. That's it. Crazy. Okay, so Russian stock market has stopped trading altogether. Foreigners are banned from selling Russian securities. Ukraine is requesting howitzers, cannons, mortars, launchers, automatic weapons, and jets to help fight. Also, they're requesting missile defense and air defense, probably like SAM turrets or whatever, surface-to-air missiles. Anyway, Belarusian soldiers, and this was an interesting update, although I don't think we've seen any movement on this as of late. There was talk that soldiers from Belarus might actually end up deploying to Ukraine, which isn't good. I mean, not that it's much potentially larger than what Russia has. It's not. But it's just the last thing we need is just more troops, more enemy troops for Ukrainians coming in there, because obviously they're on the Russian side. And then just sort of in a couple other notes here, it's worth noting that our futures have been so stupid the last, quite frankly, few weeks. I mean, it just seems like every day they're like for example, today tech is down almost 3%. S&P futures are down about 0.13, whatever. Yesterday, this crap was down like 2%. And we weren't down anywhere near that at open. So there's a lot of nonsense happening in futures trading. Personally, I just wouldn't pay too much attention to it. I think what actually works better for me for kind of expecting or setting my expectation in terms of what the market's going to do is just watching BTC's price. BTC seems to be a really good indicator of potentially what's going to happen in markets before it does. So I like that. There was also another just fun crypto note here. Apparently, South Korea is spending $186.7 million on the metaverse to create a platform to basically support digital and corporate growth. I don't know. Just thought it was interesting. So anyway, okay. Well, there you go. Thank you so much for watching this this live stream here. Check out those courses linked down below. Seriously, coupon code expiring tonight, and you won't regret it. I highly anticipate you will love the content that's in there, the live streams together, the Discord chats, everything. Shout out to those of you who joined while this live stream was happening. Brian, Stocks and Psychology of Money. Ruben, Psychology of Money. Heather, Real Estate Investing. Seth, Stocks and Psychology of Money. Raul, Stocks and Psychology of Money. Adam, Real Estate Investing, welcome aboard. And James, Stocks and Psychology of Money. Awesome. Welcome aboard. Thank you so much for joining. And folks, we'll see you all tomorrow. Have a great night.